We finally have it. One of the most anticipated horror movies of this year with Final Destination Bloodlines, the sixth in the Final Destination franchise. Now, I only really started watching the franchise in January of this year, so going in, I had some really high expectations, and this movie did meet my expectations. If anyone does not know, Final Destination 6 tells the story of someone who interfered with Death's plan, and instead of it being a group of strangers, it's a family this time, and they are the last of the line. Now, there's a lot of pros about this movie. I first off want to start off with Tony Todd. Now, Tony Todd, rest in peace, had a very sweet last scene in this movie. Not only did they answer what his connection was to the franchise, it also made a bittersweet scene because he was at the end of his life, and I think they kind of knew that. So with that scene as well, being a fan of Tony Todd, that also is sentimental. And that was a very touching scene with him, and he did a great exit of this franchise as well for his character. It also did answer questions relating to not only Tony Todd's character, but also the Final Destination 2 and the fate of the ending. And I really like that they answered that for sure. I also like how this movie kind of extended a little bit of what could happen with a character that was not in the bloodline dying. And so that was interesting. And there's other things they did to not expand the lore, but extend to what could have been. I really like that aspect. I really also like the family cast and relationship, especially Eric's character. I really liked Eric's character a lot in this, and I laughed a couple of his lines. And there was one I found really funny. One of my favorites is when there's something revealed about him, and he's like, really? And I just love that scene and that reaction. And with the family, it feels like you're more attached to the characters. And I think they really did act like a family. I really like that aspect of this movie. And the death scenes really did do well. No, there was CGI, because there's been CGI starting from 3 now. And it wasn't as bad. I think the CGI was fine this one. The deaths were cool. I really liked one scene specifically where it did make me feel like, ooh. I really did like that one scene, specifically with the deaths. So the deaths were pretty solid in this. It's overall a pretty solid, good Final Destination franchise. And I could see a lot of being in a lot of favorites this year. But really with that, all being the pros, and a lot of pros for this movie, there's one mix for me, and that is simply that this movie, after watching all of that, reminded me so much of Final Destination 2. Especially with how it ended in that last little disaster and how it took out the last one. I did like it and did not change my feelings on it, but it reminded me a little bit of Final Destination 2 a little bit too much. And there was another character, they answered what happened to the character in Final Destination 2. I like that they did that, but there was a little bit too much things I'm like, that reminds me a lot of Final Destination 2 that they did a couple times in this movie. And that's just something I noticed with watching it. I don't think it harms the movie or a lot of people's viewings, but that was just something I noticed with the recent rewatch for the first time. Another mix I want to give it is, these movies are fun, I like that, but it just seems like it's just the same thing over again. It's just someone messes with death and they just go after them in various ways. And it's cool. I like that concept, and I like they did expand it, but it is still the same thing from movie 1 to 6. And I enjoy it for those kind of movies, but I do think that is a bit of a mix for me. I'm really with that. I don't have any negatives for this movie, so we're gonna go right into spoilers. I have a little thing on either one of these sides for my spoiler tag, so you could just skip forward to, don't see the spoilers tag on my screen anymore. So let's talk spoilers. When I talked about it, it reminded me of Final Destination 2 a lot. I like that one scene where Mom was about to pull out, and just the log thing reminded me of that. I like that callback. But the one thing I did notice is towards the end, it reminded me a little bit of the original premonition where they had with like the character's dress, which I was like, are they gonna really repeat the first premonition 2D? Maybe they're gonna go to the dance in that same building or something. I didn't know, but what we got is the log literally taking out the last 2 characters, the brother and sister. And I liked that. I thought it was cool. I did like the ending, but it just reminded me too much of Final Destination 2. And as much as I like that, It's been done before in this franchise, and it felt a little bit lazy for me. And as well as the fate of The Notebook, as we're probably gonna get a seventh movie of this because it's really probably gonna make a lot of money. I don't know how they could. I don't know what they're going to do because Tony Todd from the first one explained the lore and everything. But with all those characters dead, are they just going to find the book left over from the grandmother, or is the father going to tell them? That's kind of where I don't know where they're going to go with this franchise. And if they ended it right here, that would be a really good point to end this franchise at. And with the answering of Kimberly's question of dying and then being resuscitated, actually surviving, it would have been really cool if AJ Cook came back. I'm actually a fan of Criminal Minds from her from that. So it would have been cool to do a little cameo of that as well. And I also really did like a lot about this movie, and it did meet my expectations. So really with all of that being my spoiler section of this video. Overall, future me here. I also want to mention that, of course, this whole thing would kick off with a penny, as well as I did find it funny when the kid that started it, like dropping off that penny, thought he escaped, but then it just like fell on him. That was pretty funny. I would say this movie was really good, really great. If you are a fan of Final Destination, I think you will enjoy this. I did as well. And I paid for the extra XD, so I'm really glad I did. And this was in more full theaters. And there's a lot of people filling out my theaters where I live, so that was a good thing. But overall, I would probably give it a 9 out of 10. It's near perfect, but I think a lot of people will enjoy this.